Well, good morning, peeps. This morning we have an interesting one. It's a pair of Sony CD3000 headphones. These are quite legendary old Sonys, and we've got them in to have a detachable cable mod. It's a little bit scary because obviously getting parts for a pair of headphones this old is going to be almost impossible, so everything's got to go right first time. I found some little 4-pole 3.5mm jacks, which are in a similar kind of grey, but we're going with 4-pole so that they've got the option of going balanced if they want. You know, while we're in there we might as well modernise these things. Just get some of those out. So that's the... I'm hoping that will just go in there. Yeah, maybe I should have gone for black, but I think these only come in grey, the four pole ones as far as I can see. So anyway, interesting design. There's some good features like these bits that go either side, because leaving a gap in the middle here generally makes the headphones more comfortable. You'll see that on the Sennheiser HD650 when they went from the 600, they changed the pad to have a gap in the middle. There's like a ridge that goes over your head, which gets a little bit tetchy if you have something on there for too long. Overall, nice and light, these things. Like this was Sony at its height. You know, Sony ruled the world when these came out, and this is probably 90s, noughties kind of technology, I would have thought. I don't know, you have to look it up. But yeah, I remember I used to work on the DJ ones, the HDJ 700s. They were super popular at the time. So these are made in Japan. At the time, Sony were pretty good about making stuff repairable, so I'm hoping we can get into these. One thing that's really interesting, the mechanism on the ear cup moves super fluidly. I'm wondering if they've put a bearing in there or something. It just moves. It moves really nicely, or maybe just with age, these have kind of just worn to the point where it moves super smoothly. Okay, so I'm going to start by taking off the ear pad. Luckily that's pretty straightforward. Just going to remove it from the ridge around the edge carefully, because again, I'm not sure how replaceable these are these days. Okay, so that's off. And then underneath, as you can see, so it looks like we've got a bit of foam in there with a wire going over it. Interesting. Contoured, don't know if you can see that kind of contoured edge of the thing, so it leans. Yeah, it's very. So I'm just trying to figure out what's going on here. So what's that? So that. Yeah. So it's to angle the pad when it's on the side of your head, and then the driver looks like it's possibly angled as well to get more angle in there. The edge of the ear cup, as you can see, slightly angled as well to give them more space to get the driver in at the angle that they want. So underneath here we've got three Phillips screws. Let's get into those. Find an appropriate. It's probably actually JIS screws because it's Japanese. They look a little bit different, but I've got some screwdrivers that should fit. Okay. Interesting screws. I think these are, I can't remember what the difference between a machine screw and a bolt is. These might be classed as bolts because they've only got a thread at the end and then a shank. Okay, so I've got those screws undone, and what's nice, I don't know if you can see it in there, but you've got a rubber grommet under there, again to absorb any kind of vibration, stop any rattling. It's just that little extra layer of love. Oh, and it looks like, ooh, that's come away now. Okay, I'm just gonna rescue the screws from the holes. Are they going to come out? I think they might be stuck to the rubber things. But again, under here, so it's got a rubber grommet that goes all the way through that mounts the inner casing to the outer casing. You've also got a piece of some kind of, I don't know, I thought it might be felt, but it feels quite hard, and a foam gasket here. Being very careful with these because they are quite old and this will start to degrade. So it's okay at the moment, but this, you know, foam rubber often kind of seems to give up after a while. So, okay. So we're in, or at least level 1. So as we can see here, we've got the cable coming in and then a cable coming out of there through the headband, which goes through to the other ear. So hopefully we won't have to deal with that. If we're making these balanced, we might snip this here and connect it directly to the socket. But I'm just gonna have a quick look and a think, and I'll be back in a second, and we'll figure out the next stage. Okay, I've had a sip of hot chocolate, and I'm feeling mentally prepared now to go on with this. It's a little bit scary, but what I'm going to do is, as this is the business end, I'm going to pull the cable through the housing, and what that's going to do is give me a bit more breathing room here. Just move the screws. Okay, so I suppose the first thing to do is going to be to undo this zip tie, which was stopping the cable from being pulled through. Right, that's that. Right, so this is the actual driver enclosure, and as you can see, you've got an angled driver here. I don't know if these have been modified already, but this foam that's over here is hand cut. You can tell it's been cut away with a knife or something because it's not quite even all the way around. So I'm just gonna, let's open this up and just see what's inside. I'm just interested from a design point of view how Sony did it in the olden days. We've got 3 more Phillips screws in here. Again, 2 of them don't want to come out. Obviously it'll wait until I'm not expecting it, and then they'll jump on the floor and I'll have to scrabble around and find them. Right, there we go. Okay, so inside here we have again another piece of foam to absorb the sound in there. It's got a hole through the center, which they will have used when they were tuning it. And that's the actual driver. I don't know if you can see that there. That's pretty fascinating. So it doesn't look like any modern driver I've seen. Very interesting. So again, they've done quite a lot of work on these. There's a bit of some kind of material in there which will alter the tuning. Really interesting, the olden days kind of circuit board in there. So this is where the voice core wires will attach. This is the wire to the right hand ear. This is where the wires come in externally. Just wondering what to do. I think what I'm gonna do is probably just leave all this intact as it was, and then use the existing wire that's in there to attach to the socket, because it kind of keeps it mostly original then. And also probably don't want to mess with the driver of this age if you can avoid it. But yeah, it's quite interesting just having a look inside and seeing how it was made. So yeah, it just looks like a lot of tuning and footling around has gone on in the production of this, especially with the extra foam bit on the front there. It was like a little add-on that they've added. You got this with the hole in the middle. I suspect that hole makes some kind of difference to the airflow. It's directly above the hole in the magnet and roughly the same size. So it's probably similar to the mod that we've been doing on the 990s. It does kind of improve things a little bit and make it sound a bit better. But yeah, the size of that hole we discovered is quite crucial. You know, we tried lots of different things with the tuning and getting that just right. So this will have been laser cut foam to get it just just so, whereas the one on the other side, as I said, was hand cut. Right, so I've got a bit of the original cable here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to snip that down there somewhere, and we're going to reuse the existing wire. So if I snip it roughly where that knot was, then I know that that's going to reach down to where the socket is. Once you cut, there's no going back from there. We're committed now. So I'm just going to pop this back together the same way it was. So the cable rested in there. How many wires are in there? 3. Yeah, I'm gonna cut the headband cable as well and solder that directly onto there so that they can go balance. It's just a little bit scary, kind of snipping extra cables that you could get away with not snipping, but it's the best way of doing it. So I'm gonna remove that there, cut that quite close. Okay, and I'm gonna unsolder this. Am I gonna unsolder it? No, I'm gonna cut these right back to the driver, just to make sure nothing's gonna short out potentially in the future. There you go. So there's no chance of them interfering with anything else. That's good. Okay, I'm gonna put this back together again now. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just taking it easy, Alright, so I'm going to pop those 3 screws back in there. So we have that out, and we can remove the original cable and the original grommet that's in there, and I'm hoping the socket will just kind of fit through that hole. That'd be really nice if it did. Come on you bugger. Let's get some pliers on that. There we go. So that's the original rubber grommet that the cable went through, which leaves us with a hole roughly the right size. Right, we're winning. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Ah, I see a possible issue. That's got to go in there. It's got to fit in that gap. I don't really want to modify that if I can avoid it. Let's just see how much space we've got. It was interesting that the headband cable was actually over the ear thing, so I don't think that's supposed to be like that. Okay, let's see how much space I've got. Oh, it will. I don't know. It's borderline. I'm gonna have to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to modify the socket rather than drilling anything out of the headphones. I'm just going to trim these connectors back a bit, especially the ground one. Gives me a little bit more room. Test fit that again. Yeah, just gonna have to space that out just a touch, just to get that in. I'm just trying to figure out. Whew. It's a scary business, this. Alright, just gonna remove the fabric cover from the outside of this. Yeah, I should probably open this up and do it from the other side. Sorry, you know, it's one of those things where you just gotta go super slow. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull this cable through and then strip it off from this side and then poke the individual wires back through. That's gonna give me the most possible room inside. Yeah, as you can see with this kind of thing, there's lots of kind of test fitting and going backwards and forwards, trying to figure out the best way to to do it. Oh. This does bring back memories of working on the Sony DJ headphones. They're actually a very similar cable. They've just wrapped this one in some kind of nylon cord to make it look fancy. The actual wires inside look like the standard Sony fare of the era. Now then, the reason I'm not bothering to rewire this with fancy wire is it's a relatively short run of wire, so it doesn't make that much difference. And also you've got this very thin headband cable, and I'm not going to be able to replace that headband cable really without causing some kind of issues. Oh yeah, looking at the hinges. No, there's no, is it bearing? No, there's no bearing in there. It just moves super fluidly. It's like really nicely toleranced or something in there. Okay, so now go on to strip this back. Again, carefully does it. Hoping I can just kind of score the outside and tear it open and then snip it back. We will see. We will see what we will see. Okay, so I've got this started. So as you can see underneath the rubber, don't know if you can see this, but they're basically, the 3 cores are then wrapped in paper underneath that, which is quite interesting. I've seen that before. I'm not sure why that is done. But there we go. I should be able to strip that out. So I've just basically scored along it, made a little cut at this end, and then I can use this a bit like cheese wire just to tear it open. So you can see the paper's kind of spiral wound on there. Quite an interesting covering to the wire. It's shinier than you get on modern wires. I'm not sure why that is. Perhaps it's just been polished by the paper. Right, so I'm just gonna lead that through there. Just give myself a little bit of room at the end. I'm just gonna put a dab of hot glue inside just to stop me from accidentally pulling this through too far. Okay, so just going to put just a little tab on there, which will just kind of hold that in place while I work on it, just to prevent me from yanking the cable off the driver. But obviously hot glue can be easily removed if you need to. Right, okay, so I think we're in a position now where we can start thinking about soldering these back together. That doesn't feel right. So now I need to strip these wires. I only actually need 2 of them. Left and right, let's just strip the other end of this. And then we'll see. Ah yeah, so look, that classic old Sony jack there with the green gaps in it. That's how you knew stuff was genuine until they got copied. Oh yeah. So stripped. And unfortunately it looks like this has got Kevlar strands in it, and they will need to be removed to get it to solder nicely. So that's going to be a bit of a bugger, but hey. Let's test this wire. See which is which. I think I remember. I think red is right and green is left, but we'll just make sure. Yep, just as suspected. So that is good. Das ist gut. Cool. Alright, so we know vaguely what we're doing. So now I've got to strip these back, remove the Kevlar fibres from the bit I want to solder, because otherwise it will mess with the solder and you won't get a really nice solder joint. So leave it with me, I'm going to do that, and we'll hopefully get these back together at some point today. So to remove these, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bend back the copper, and the Kevlar will stay kind of standing up. The copper will hold its form that you bend it to, and the Kevlar will go back to its original shape. So then you can separate the two and just snip out a little bit of that. So then I should be able to solder that neatly. If ever you open up a cable and it's got some kind of strands in there that aren't copper, strengthening it, I would remove those if you can. Oh, there's still some there, because basically they'll make your soldering go all cruddy. There'll be bits of melted plastic essentially in the solder joint, which is not cool. You also need some pretty good scissors to cut it, because they normally use Kevlar or nylon, and it's pretty strong stuff, and super fine fibers, so it'll just slip in between the blades of the scissors if your scissors aren't on point. If your scissor game is not on point. Okay. Alright, that's good. So now I've got wires ready to be tinned. Warm up the soldering iron. Might as well do these as well while I'm in there. It's just the headband cable. Looks like Lit's wire with the ground wire around the positive wire. So again, you have to separate out all the gold fibers from the red fibers to ensure you don't get a short. So this is going to need some testing before I complete it. It's pretty easy for stuff to go wrong in this kind of situation. Alright, so there we go. So essentially on a Lit's wire, every strand is insulated from each other, which is why they can twist the positive and the negative together without them shorting. But when you solder them, it removes that coating, so you need to make sure that you haven't got the left and right touching. So this is, so essentially, what have we got? Yeah. So they've coloured the positive strands red and the ground ones are gold. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tin the ends and then make sure that this isn't shorted, because if it is shorted it means I've got a strand mixed in with the wrong colour. I'm getting about 35 ohms, so that's good. I'd expect that to be much lower if there was some kind of short, so that is right. Whoo! Cool, blimey. Yeah. Right. So now what we want to do is basically feed this through here, and we're going to solder that to our socket. Oh. What I probably want to do is get this nut on, just in case we want to use the nut. Right, now this is a 4-pole jack, so I'm just getting a 4-pole 3.5mm to test it with, because I'm not sure which contact goes where. Oh, this is hurting my brain. Right, what do I want? I want this to be right plus. So I'm going to solder that onto there. Apply a little bit of flux to all these connectors. So essentially we've just got a syringe full of flux here. Just lets you place it really accurately. Yeah, we used to use it in a tin, but then when the technicians got some of this in, I'm like, oh my god, this is the future. Syringing, that's the way forwards. That is it this one? It is. So I have the all the cables wired up. I'm just going to test it using a multimeter. Now then, this multimeter doesn't put out very much voltage, so it's pretty safe to test headphone drivers and stuff with. Okay, so we're getting 35 ohms on that one. 34 ohms on that one, 34 and a half, but I suppose you've got the headband cable, which is where you've got the difference. Is that all done? Alright, so I'm just going to do a bit more testing and footling and stuff, and then we're going to reassemble this and hopefully everything goes according to plan. Okay, so here's a classic example of not measuring twice and cutting once enough. The bolt that the nut that I carefully threaded through so that we could screw this on doesn't actually reach the thread once this is through. The body's too thick, so we're going to have to come up with another thing, and I don't want this little nut kind of rattling around in there. So I'm going to unsolder everything. I'm going to get a new socket, start again, because you don't want to solder these things more than once. I'm going to resolder everything, come up with a different way of securing it in there. It's probably going to have to be glued rather than threaded on there. But yeah, leave it with me because this is going to involve a lot of swearing. I've just done all this. I've got to redo it. So yeah, I'm just going to quickly unsolder that, get out my second socket, solder that in place, and then hopefully we're ready to put it all back together. Okay, so I've gone back in and I've soldered in a new socket. What I've also done is I realised there's not quite enough room inside, so I've 3D printed a little collar with the same profile as all of this, so it'll fit in there nicely, which will just extend the socket out by a couple of mil and shrink tubed over the little wires. Also in the socket, because we can't use the nut, what I've done is I've made some diagonal slashes in the bodywork of this with a scalpel, so when we glue it, the glue's got something to kind of grip onto and it's going to stop it from being able to be pulled out. I've had to make a little profile to fit the curved edge of this here cut nicely. Did take a couple of iterations to get that right, but that's the beauty of 3D printers. You just mock it up and print out another one, and because it's quite a small little section that we're printing, it only takes a couple of minutes to print, so it's ideal for a 3D printer. So I've got some very hot glue here, extra hot, just so it flows into all of those fine things. This is a high performance hot glue, so it's a little bit stronger than the standard stuff. Like, it dries brown, so it's not as pretty, but because it's hidden away, that's not going to be a problem. So I'm just going to let that kind of get into all those little slashes that I've made, so when it sets, it'll have something to pull against and it'll stop the socket from being pulled out. This won't need a great amount of strength. If you're pushing the plug in, obviously this is all supported here. When you're pulling it out, it's only got to put up with the force of removing a 3.5mm jack. There's not, everything else is kind of, it fits just right with a 3D printed section, so it's all kind of supported by the bodywork of this. The glue just kind of stops it from being yanked out. Just letting that cool off. There we go, so that's in nicely. This is where I find out that it doesn't quite fit. Don't know, I've done a lot of backwards and forwards measuring up. It looks like it should be good. Yep, we're in. little stringy bit of hot glue there. So now I can remount those screws on the rubber bungs. Yeah, I don't know if I showed it, I don't think I did, but I left the unused wire still attached to the driver and just kind of glued it out the way. So if anyone wants to go back in and convert these back to stock, they should be able to do that. So if ever these want to be restored back to their original state, it should be pretty easy to see where everything goes. Okay, so there we go. So that's got a little socket down there. Now, I'm not 100% happy with the fitment there. What's happened there? It's not a disaster. It's just not quite as super neat as I would have liked. But you know, you have to look really closely to see that gap. So I'm going to just put the pads on, and then it's going to go on the test rig. I might open it up and just neaten this up just a little bit. I might... yeah, I think what I'm going to have to do is... Yeah, I think I might have to remove a little bit of material off the socket and then reinstall it, just because it's at a slight angle and it's annoying me. So leave it with me again. I'm going to sort that out and then we'll stick it on the test rig, and then hopefully these are done. Okay, so there we have it. So we've got the 3.5mm 4-pole socket, so it's potential to make these balanced if you want. Tried to be sympathetic to the original thing, because obviously these are a classic. I've reused most of the internal cabling, haven't rewired them internally or anything like that. All I need to do now is fit a 3.5mm jack on that, and that will go in there. But then they have got the option of buying a separate balance cable and trying them out balanced, which will be fascinating because no one's obviously probably ever had a balance pair of these before. Really interesting design. So yeah, the interesting thing was this enclosure here where the driver sits is isolated from the headband, so you can see that kind of moves around there, which is quite interesting. So it's not gonna, I don't know, just allows it to move a little bit. I'm not sure what the advantage of that is. Obviously you're not going to get any rattle from it touching. Yeah, I'm not sure what the reason for that is, but they've put a lot of kind of engineering and thought into it, so it must be for a good reason. It might be something interesting to experiment with. I'm trying out a few new kind of headphone enclosure designs at the moment, and I'm not sure, I can't quite think what that would do. So yeah, it's given me some ideas for some things to try. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. If you've got any questions, stick them in the comments and I'll probably get back to you. Okay, all right. Obviously, you know, like, subscribe, that kind of thing, if you fancy it. But yeah, it was quite an interesting job. Bye.